Good morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Hope you've had a good week and got a good weekend planned for this coming weekend as we creep closer and closer to celebrating Christmas. And so this morning we'll go back to the 119th Psalm and continue looking at it. This psalm, as we said yesterday, is just over and over. It's about the Word of God, and it uses a lot of different terms to describe the Word of God. But I believe if you could get it down to really one point, the reason the psalmist is talking so much about the Word of God is he understands that, or he believes that it is the secret, it is the formula for a good life, for having a happy life, a blessed life. And that is to actually, again, follow the commandments, the word, the testimony, all the different labels he's going to give the Word of God. That if we truly want our life to be an enjoyable, fulfilled, satisfying life, then we find that in obedience to the Word of God. And so we'll be continuing, looking there at beginning in verse 5 today, and going from there in verse 5. He says, "Oh, that my ways were directed to keep thy statutes." And so, again, another word that he uses. We've in the first four verses, we've seen the law of the Lord, his testimonies, has commanded us, his precepts. And so he just continues to use these different words for describing the Word of God. And he says then that, again, with this idea of why or how it brings a happy life, he says it is found, his heart's desire would be to be directed, to be led by the commandments of God. And that is his again his prayer, his desire in life is to be led by the Word of God. Great example for us today to have that heart's desire. And I think as I think about that, I think that's the difference for a lot of people is we are. Many people are obedient to the Word of God, mainly because they're afraid not to be. We live in this mindset of God's going to zap us or something if we don't. I don't think that's what the psalmist is saying here. The psalmist says something completely different. He doesn't say that I want to keep his statutes and have my ways directed by the Lord because I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't. He believes that is, again, the secret to happiness, that is the only way to have a fulfilled life, the only way to have a life of joy and of peace is to have your life to be directed by the statutes, the Word of God. And that's so different, I think, than the way many people are attempting to follow the Word of God. Again, that they're doing it from fear. They're doing it from a legalistic burden around their neck, but the psalmist is saying that's the joy. Oh, I want my life to be directed by God. Look at his next verse. Then shall I not be ashamed when I have respect unto all thy commandments. And so there's another word, commandments. He says, I realize that this is where joy comes from. I don't have to be ashamed. I don't have to be embarrassed when I live according to his word. I will praise thee with uprightness of heart when I shall have learned thy righteous judgment. So there again, another word, judgments. He says that puts a song in my heart, that brings joy into my life when I'm able to live a righteous life, because I know that is where joy and peace is. I think, and this is probably a poor analogy, I think about the speed limit signs on the interstates, or on any road for that matter. Most of us, maybe not, I don't know, some of us, whatever, we drive the speed limit because we are afraid to break it. We're afraid we'll get a ticket or something like that. Not because it really brings us joy. Well, that's the difference here in what the psalmist is saying. He doesn't He doesn't want to follow the law because he's afraid he's going to get a ticket or get in trouble. But the opposite side of that is that he wants to follow the law because he knows that brings happiness. I will keep thy statutes. Oh, forsake me not utterly. He understands again that's where his comfort comes from, his safety comes from. And to use the speed limit example again, a poor example, I understand it's not perfect, but it's a difference in doing the speed limit because you're afraid you'll get a ticket, or the difference in following the speed limit because you believe that is the safest speed, that is the speed that will keep you and your family safe as you travel. Well, that's what the psalmist is saying here. He's not following the word of God because he's afraid God's going to strike him dead, hit him with a lightning bolt if he fails. He's saying, I understand that true happiness comes from following those commandments. And so his everyday desire, as ours should be, is to live in obedience to the commandments, to the judgments, to the statutes, to the testimonies, to all these things, that different ways that he is describing the Word of God. And so our challenge this morning, the question that I would put before us today is, why do we follow the Word of God? Or maybe I should start by saying, do you follow the commandments of God, the Word of God? And if you do, why? And what's your reason for following the Word of God? Do you do it because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't? Or are we obedient and follow the Word of God because we know that in that obedience and in living by the Word of God is where we find our true joy? You have to answer that question today, and only you can answer that question. All right, have a great day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow morning.